Senate President and Speaker of the House of Representatives set agenda for the federal legislature as the National Assembly resumes plenary. You're welcome to the Gavel. I'm Joke Rogers. The National Assembly has resumed legislative proceedings after a 2-month recess, and the leadership of both chambers are already highlighting the priority areas for attention in the coming months. The Petroleum Industry Bill, the 2021 budget, as well as the amended legislative agenda are some of the key areas federal legislators will be focusing on. President Muhammadu Buhari has transmitted the eagerly anticipated Petroleum Industry Bill to the National Assembly for consideration and passage. And having passed first reading at the red chambers, the Senate President, as well as the Speaker of the House of Representatives, have given assurances that it will be given expedited action.
The National Assembly has resumed plenary session after a 2-month recess. It is resuming at a time when Nigerians are reeling from an increase in fuel prices and an economy worsened by dwindling government revenue as a result of COVID-19.
We are confronted with
Senate President Ahmed Lawan reminds his colleagues that Nigeria is confronted with a huge revenue deficit, and this presents serious challenges for the country.
I'm aware that the Executive will be presenting the 2021 budget estimates by next week. Similarly, our Joint Committee on Petroleum Resources Downstream and Petroleum Resources Upstream and Gas have had some preliminary engagements with the Federal Minister of Petroleum Resources, the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, and other stakeholders in the oil and gas industry to discuss the Petroleum Industry Bill, PIB. The PIB has been conveyed to the Senate for consideration. The COVID-19 pandemic had disrupted our budgetary plans, requiring the review of the 2020 budget. We must carry out oversights to ensure that the revised 2020 budget is properly implemented. The oversights are even more imperative as the revised 2020 budget is targeted at addressing the specific challenges occasioned by COVID-19 pandemic.
How can the legislature address these economic challenges? According to the Senate President, the upper chamber must improve its oversight of MDA's implementation of the revised 2020 budget, as well as efficiently working on the 2021 budget.
The Senate needs to pay particular attention to the implementation of the federal government economic sustainability plan. This strategic plan is an essential means of revamping our economy as it provides interventions in the mass agricultural program, infrastructure, mass housing program, investments in healthcare infrastructure, amongst others.
In the House of Representatives, the Speaker says the lower chamber has updated its legislative agenda, highlighting areas it will be given attention to going forward.
There is an ongoing problem of ministries, departments, and agencies of government failing to implement projects and programs for which funds have been provided in the budget. Any expenditure of public funds outside of the Appropriation Act is a crime, as is a failure to implement programs and projects for which funds have been allocated and provided.
Meanwhile, the House of Representatives has begun the process of holding accountable public officials who shunned the summons of a National Assembly. The Speaker has sponsored a bill to this effect, and the bill passed second reading in the House. The bill seeks to amend Section 89 of the Constitution by deleting the old subsection 1D and replacing it with a new one, which reads, to issue a warrant to compel the attendance of any person who, after having been summoned to attend, fails, refuses, or neglects to do so, and does not excuse such failure, refusal, or neglect to the satisfaction of a legislative house or the committee in question.
The bill seeks to amend Section 89, subsection 1D, and replace it with the following wordings: to issue a warrant to compel the attendance of any person who, after having been summoned to attend, fails, refuses, or neglects to do so, and does not excuse such failure, refusal, or neglect to satisfaction of the Legislative House or the committee in question. Any person who, after having been summoned to attend, fails, refuses, neglects to do so, and does not excuse such failure, refusal, or neglect to the satisfaction of the Legislative House or the committee in question, commits an offense and is liable on conviction to such punishment as shall be prescribed by an act of the National Assembly.
The proposed law will provide exception to the kind of persons to be compelled by the National Assembly, namely the President, Vice President, governors and deputy governors, diplomats and representatives of international organizations. The House of Representatives had in December 2019 passed through second reading a bill seeking to sanction the police and other security agencies and the operatives who failed to enforce arrest warrants issued by the National Assembly.
The National Assembly is resuming at a time of economic challenges caused by dwindling revenue from falling oil prices on the international crude oil market. Keen observers of the legislature want the National Assembly to intervene with legislative actions to address this problem. We spoke with the CEOs of 2 online publications to discuss other areas which the Ninth Assembly should prioritize.
When they resume its a new session, they must be able to impress within this next 1 year, because thereafter it will be coming into the election season, where those of them who will want to seek re-election will become distracted. Those of them who want to campaign, generally, so they only have basically this 1 year to do all that they have to do. And I must make the point that this is National Assembly has not quite impressed both themselves and, of course, the general public. What do I mean by themselves? I do not, for instance, see any legacy bill that this National Assembly has passed that has been assented to. I mean, a bill from a member of the National Assembly. By this time, last National Assembly, the 8th Assembly, we already had, we could speak of certain kind of bills, like the bill that set up the federal consumer competition, what they call FCCPC, So right now, not even the PIB that received a lot of urgent mentioning, respect to planning for, the legislative tenure, has actually even been brought to the National Assembly. Within this time, in the last assembly as well, the 8th Assembly had a private member bill sponsored for petroleum sector reforms, So we are not seeing any defining legacy for the current National Assembly 1 year down the line. So coming back this next, upon resumption, that's why I said they need to impress themselves. And they also need to impress Nigerians. Nigerians have believed this National Assembly currently to be one that is a yes boy to the executive. So these are things that give the impression, amongst others, that this National Assembly has not cut its teeth with respect to independence, respect to that separation of power, even in theory. Now, coming back to the question of what do we expect, we want to see the National Assembly, when they resume, that will tackle the issues that are currently hitting up the social economy. I'm not talking of politics now. You know the issues. We expect that they would pick up from that shame, resume and address the issue of subsidy removal, whatever it is, by the executive. And addressing that also requires that it will be addressed holistically.
Are you worried that, we'll have a situation where this key things like the constitutional amendment, we are saying we're almost in the second year of this assembly, and you like you've said earlier, the last year is usually meant for politicking for those who want to return. And are you not worried that they might not be able to finish this process before the expiration of the ninth assembly? Should they have started this process earlier?
Yes, there is need to have some worries about that, especially from the side of citizen participation. They already have a timetable. I am not aware of the full details of that timetable. I mean the Senate Committee on Constitutional Review. But my concern is that does it allow enough time for citizens to make input into the process? Because these are very fundamental issues of states that the committee and the Senate, by extension, would be dealing with. They have called for memoranda. Would they have enough time to move around the country, to mobilize and sensitize citizens to, first of all, become aware of what these issues are? Because citizens generally need to understand what these issues are before they can actually, intervene and say, look, this is what we want. So that is my worry. They have started proactively, like I said, before resumption, they started doing some work. But, we would like to see some, some haste with respect to galvanizing citizen participation and citizen inclusion in the process. That needs to happen because what are they doing this for? It's for the citizens. If they are not doing this, they are doing this without adequate citizen consultation and representation, then they can stick with their timetable and say, look, within this year, we'll come back and prepare a report and present before Senate. But how much of citizen buy-in and input such reports would have is a question that we need to reconcile down the line.
Just a few days ago, we heard the Minister of Finance, Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, saying that Nigeria has recorded a 65% drop in revenue. And then I think yesterday, day before yesterday also, we also heard that the federal government is sending what they call revenue, officers of directorate cadre to manage revenue in the government-owned enterprises, the big names, NNPC, FIRS, MPA, NIMASA. That's unprecedented. It just shows you that Nigeria is struggling, to earn an income, as a nation. So National Assembly should prioritize how they can, support the executive arm. Look at these interventions, look at what these figures, these interventions are being thrown around by the executive arm. How can we help through their committees, through interventions to so the related MDAs. When you say the federal government now wants to supervise revenue collection to keep the country afloat, the relevant committees in the National Assembly should now do proper oversight, and then we expect them also to look into not to drop the ball when it comes to security, because as I sat waiting for you, we heard about I was showing a news story about banditry in Katsina. So insecurity in the country is still very high. Before they left National Assembly, I think once or twice I've called for the removal or for the stepping down of the service chiefs. They also should not drop the ball when it comes to, should prioritize security, and then I think what they really need to do also is some of the probes that made headlines for the we want to see the reports, like NDDC probe. We want to see the reports. And of course, I think also they are submitted at the Senate level, the MTF and the FSP. The last time I read about it, the chairman of the committee was threatening MDAs. Of course, the big names again came out, the CBNs of this world and all of that. So we need them to, complete work so that they can really keep to this January, December, budgeting a fiscal year that they have started. So these are the basic things I expect them to, and how they will manage the revised, budget for 2020. How are they going to ensure that even this court budget is funded? So that the kind of things I expect from National Assembly as they resume.
What about key legislations like the Petroleum Industry Bill, Constitutional Amendment, that they have already started?
For me, as a feminist and as a gender activist, also the bill on sex for grades bill that was passed by the Senate, I expect that the House of Reps will speedily pass that bill too. So when it comes to petroleum industry, I think the last time the president spoke about it, he was worried about the plan to be established a petroleum regulatory commission, saying that I think that aspect was that it's supposed to keep 10% of whatever revenue it makes, and that's always been a long debate. The National Assembly is saying no agency should keep back, funding even when that agency is established by Act of Parliament, like they're trying to do with the PGIB. So I think So I think whatever they want to do, they should meet with the president. Since this is a National Assembly, even though it has been mocked as rubber stamps, they have a good relationship with the president. So they should exploit it and get these very important legislations passed on time. And it won't be too great for even such bills to be signed into law before the end of this year. We still have time.
The Electoral Act, this was one of the issues we had in the last parliament, where the Electoral Act was passed, but the president didn't sign it into law because he felt it was too close to the elections. Now we might run into that same problem again. We're almost 2 years into this assembly, and we know the final year of the assembly is spent on politicking.
Like I said, I think the National Assembly should exploit their relationship with the president, and the president should also feel the mood, the pulse of the nation. You see how everybody's very happy with how the elections went in Edo. Nigerians want, a law, and you saw that Nigerians were reacting based on law. You saw people doing citizens arrest saying, how dare you try to buy votes? It's illegal, because they've heard about severally from media that vote buying is outlawed. So if you give Nigerian people a very good electoral act, you see them even making that act, that law work by itself. So I think the president should feel the pulse of the nation.
The program will be back in a moment. Do stay with us. You're welcome back to the Gavel. Security topped some of the deliberations in the Senate during the week. A federal lawmaker raised the matter of the killings of traditional rulers in Plateau State, while another drew the attention of the Senate to the extrajudicial killing of a woman in Abuja.
A federal lawmaker representing Plateau North, Senator Estefanos Gyang, has called the attention of the Senate to the killings of traditional rulers in Plateau State. Senator Gyang, who presented the matter during Wednesday's plenary session, lamented the killing of over 10 traditional rulers across the state by suspected herdsmen. He says the latest, the killing of Gwomrei of Foron, His Royal Highness Dr. Bulus Chuwang Jang, who was assassinated at his palace last week. The Senate has urged the Inspector General of Police, Mr. Mohammed Adamu, to urgently deploy security for the protection of traditional rulers in Plateau State.
Mr. President, this trend is quite disturbing because not less than 10 other traditional rulers have unfortunately suffered death through the same circumstances. It is already known that the first-class chief in Bokos local government was also assassinated. These very disturbing developments have called for the need for security to be tightened around our traditional rulers to ensure that the increasing threat to their safety is averted.
The Senate send our condolences to the government, and people of Plateau State, particularly your senatorial district, where most of these incidents took place. And we pray that the security agencies, like you suggested, should provide sufficient security around, of course, the traditional rulers, but provide security for everybody.
The Senate also considered a matter of urgent public importance about the alleged illegal arrest, detention, rape, torture, and extrajudicial killing of 28-year-old Ifeoma Abugu by operatives of the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, SAS, in Abuja.
Further, this stated further records that since the extrajudicial killing of Ms. Abugu by SAS operatives in second week of September 2020, the FCT Police Command has, to the disappointment of relatives and concerned family members of the deceased, engaged in a blame game in a desperate bid to either exonerate the SAS operatives who were involved in the illegal arrest, torture and killing of the deceased.
The upper chamber is directing its committees on police affairs and judiciary to investigate the circumstances that led to the arrest, detention, torture and killing of Ifeoma Abugu by SAS operatives in the FCT Police Command. The committees are also to investigate the status of the presidential directive on the reorganization of SAS in the light of public outcry over atrocities perpetrated by SAS operatives.
Let's take a look at more legislative actions in the House of Representatives during the week.
A member of the House of Representatives from Benue State has raised a motion under privilege over the procedure for the passage of a National Water Resources Bill and wants the bill rescinded. His motion is backed by two lawmakers.
This same water bill was stated as National Water Resource Bill 2020, but it was not treated as such. A bill that emanated in 2020 should have gone through first reading, second reading, and third reading before passage. It was not treated as such.
Mr. Speaker, I want to question the jurisdiction for us to entertain the water bill. We have no local state jurisdiction, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to adopt the postulations and arguments of Honorable Zandu as if they are mine. Considering that we have procedural error, leave it aside. Constitutionally, we have no right to discuss that.
But there are dissenting voices which did not go down well with some members.
These bills followed the normal procedure of the House as enshrined, excuse me please, as enshrined in the order of this book, in order of this. Let's put it on a substantive motion, let it be on notice, and then we'll discuss it. any attempt to change the rules, Mr. Speaker, we will challenge that decision.
When the Speaker brings the House under control, he asks the chairman of the House Committee on Rules and Business to withdraw the bill and regazette it before presenting to the House for consideration. Meanwhile, a federal lawmaker, Representative Chinedu Obidigwe, has raised a motion on the need to dredge the Anambra River to prevent floods.
The House notes that economic losses to the annual flooding of those communities as a result of shallowness of Anambra River depth cannot be compared with the cost of dredging the river to reclaim its normal depth, which will enable it to contain large volume of water whenever it's emptied into the river.
A federal lawmaker in the Senate wants Nigeria to learn lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic by imbibing a saving culture to safeguard the economy from the rapidly changing dynamics and volatility of the global oil market. He's proposing a legislation which will enable additional funding for the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority, including it as a first-line charge beneficiary of the monthly distributable funds from the Federation account.
The bill proposes an amount equivalent to 20% of the amount standing to the credit or Federation account, less the statutory 13% of the revenue accruing to the Federation account directly from the natural resources to be allocated to the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority on a monthly basis. Let me strongly emphasize that the need for a dedicated saving culture to safeguard the Nigerian economy going forward due to the rapidly changing dynamics and volatility of the global oil market. Let us learn our lessons now with the outcome of the COVID-19 pandemic, because none of us knows tomorrow.
Majority of lawmakers are in support of the proposed legislation.
Seeking for this particular agency to be put on a first-line charge under the revenue distribution. My dear colleague, we cannot have it better than this.
At a point in time, Mr. President, we had kept money for rainy day. And somehow, somewhere, the people who were in charge decided they didn't want the monies kept. Today, COVID has shown us that a country that does not plan for the future is a country that has not planned at all.
If we are doing service for the country, every person should give. So we cannot take other people's money. You take Benway money, 20%, and then you leave the 13% for states that are beneficiaries. I don't think it's fair. And so, if we are doing 20%, it must be inclusive of the 30% derivation that goes to other states from the source.
The bill is sent to the Committee on National Planning for further legislative work. A federal lawmaker representing Ogun Senatorial District, Senator Ibikunle Amosun, is calling on the political class to work for the advancement of the country. Briefing journalists at the National Assembly, Senator Amosun says Nigerians deserve good governance and leadership from the ruling class.
If truth must be told, it's more from us, the elite, really. For me, an average Nigerian see themselves as one. You won't even know who is a Muslim or Christian. I remember growing up and in school, we don't even know the difference between both. So I think it's more of from people like us, the politicians, the elites, that tend to dwell more on what divides us than maybe concentrating on those things that unite us. Nigeria, we are lucky because of our diversity. How many nations can boast of maybe our population, our diversity, our human capital, the endowment, natural resources that the Almighty endowed us with? How many countries of the world can lay claim to this? But again, just like what you said, we all must come together and see ourselves as one. And once that is done, there's no height that we cannot attain. So that's, for me, that is we should be our brother's keeper. We should see ourselves as one, which indeed we are, really and truly. And once we imbibe those, what I call values, yes, we will overcome all these predicaments.
That's the Gavel this week. If you'd like to contribute to any of the issues discussed on the program, please email us on thegavel@channelstv.com. I'm Joker Rogers. Thanks for staying with us. Bye for now.